Hi guys. So first thing is when I did that last video, I forgot to include the two ladies that are new to the community. And I forgot to uh, post their information. So I'm going to see to it that their links are left in the community tab um, for that. And I was also going to put up some screenshots of their actual YouTube channels. So I forgot to do that in my last video, so I'm going to kind of do that now. So I won this deck last week on Selena Essence of the Moon's live last week, and I'm going to put a link to her channel in the description also. Now the author, she was doing an interview with the author Dina Rosenberg, and of course you see I'm gonna butcher that name, so I'm just not. And I'm just not. I'm gonna totally butcher that name, and I don't want to be disrespectful. So anyway, I won this deck, and Dina works at a witchy shop known as Amityville Apothecary. They do lives on, I just found out that they actually do a podcast here on YouTube, but they have lives over on Instagram, and they have a TikTok account. One thing that these ladies do is they have a thing. They have three of them. They have Date with a Tarot, Date with a Book, and Date with an Oracle. And this is something that the ladies do. I hope at some point to be able to save up the $25, $30 at some point to purchase one of their books or oracle or tarot. So anyway, I will link their video, their channel in the description box also. But one of the ladies that works at Amityville Apothecary is Dina Rosenberg. And she was the creator of this deck, the Crystal Keys Tarot. So I thought that, and I already took the, because it is so hard to do things one-handed when you have arthritis and hand surgery. Ugh. Okay, so here is the book, and it's a pretty standard guidebook, and the pages are in color, and this has a lot to do with crystal work and crystal healing, which is one of the reasons why I was I was really into the deck when they were showing it on the live. So it's kind of cool that they have a key, and then of course your string, and I'm all about the purple. I am all about the purple. And of course, did I get them all out? Nope. And then you have the lock in the bottom of the box. So, of course, I bet you I just knocked all these cards out of order. But anyway, this is more, and I'm going to set this down again so that I can set this up correctly, or try to. And, it's daylight out, and the lighting is really good. So, of course, you see all the purple gilding on that, and there's the back. But I thought, while I showed the deck and promoted the deck, I would do the VR to Amethyst Ascension's video that she did on tarot and consumerism. And there was a lot of discussion about something that she had brought up, was something about walkthroughs. There are decks that I more than likely, had I looked at a walkthrough, I would not have purchased the deck. Simply because there are fonts and things that I struggle with, as I am a visually impaired person. And not to mention the fact that the art, sometimes the borders are too big. There's a lot of things. I try to get things that are visually okay for me, that work for me visually. Not to mention the fact that pip decks are my nemesis. I cannot read pip decks intuitively. I think I talked about that before. I can't with pip decks. I just can't. Maybe it's my sign that I need to work with it better. But I mean, I do walkthroughs all the time of decks when I get them. Especially if it's a deck that I don't see a lot of walkthroughs on. And as far as lazy tarot or lazy forms of videos, nobody watches them. And if it's a deck that I don't see people doing a lot on, or maybe I'm doing it because as a visually impaired person, and there are other visually impaired creators, because people seem to kind of forget about us, with exception to my inner circle, that are easier for those of us with visual impairments to deal with when it comes to tarot. So I do it from a visually impaired person's perspective, which is probably why not a lot of people watch when I do these types of videos. But there are decks that I would not have purchased had I not looked at a walkthrough first. Now, there are some decks that I've looked at that they don't have a lot of reviews on. But I think that to call it lazy is, when you have to make your situation, where the lighting's good, where you don't have a lot of glare, and you have a quiet place, which I never do. and working out the timing of it. I do the best I can given my situation. But walkthroughs, can be very, very important, because some people have disabilities, or maybe the art, they might like one or two cards, the art doesn't resonate, or maybe they need a tarot deck for a specific thing, because as we all know, different decks have different messages. So before purchasing a deck, yes, I feel that that's very important to see if the art matches with the type of situation that you want to do. We have our light, fluffy decks, and then we have our more meaningful, and then we have the ones that are just kick ass and take no prisoners. But when it comes to, I'm really kind of struggling with kind of the tarot snobs of the community also, and I'm going to get flack for that. I was given decks for my birthday and was on a live stream talking about the decks that I was gifted, because you have those that say we shouldn't buy decks. We should wait until they're given to us, because look, to each their own. Because there's a lot of not only gatekeeping within the witchy community, I guess there's a lot of gatekeeping in the tarot community also. But I was gifted the decks. The decks were purchased, and I got reamed by everybody in the live. And because I was culturally appropriating But the person who bought the decks for me was a Hispanic person because they were the Santa Muerte Tarot as well as Oracle. And I was beginning my journey with Santa Muerte as a deity at the time. But I got totally reamed. And then there was another deck and such that I got reamed for that nobody... But it was a real bully fest, and I ended up leaving the live. You know, we are individuals. What works for one person isn't going to necessarily work for others. And we all have, of course, when it comes to the art is subjective. You know, what you might like. You know, a lot of us might show a deck and it's like, oh, I might want to go and get that. That kind of vibes with what I'm attempting to do, or that's kind of my vibe. But we all have sort of our own limitations, our own things that when it comes to the art. Now with this particular deck, I'm going to probably use in the guidebook a lot more, but you know, everybody has their thing. We all read differently. We all do things differently. We all interpret things differently. So, you know, if why would I spend money on a deck that I'm not going to like and I'm going to end up getting rid of later? If you don't like watching tarot walkthroughs, then simply don't watch them, which is obviously what I do in my case. So I'm getting a bit more creative and finding a VR to do as I do the cards. So, but, and this deck has just recently came out. So, I know that they're going to be selling it at Amityville Apothecary. So I don't know. I came to the live late. But the gatekeeping has got to kind of stop, and the judgments on where, you know, why you bought that deck or the walkthroughs. I buy decks because they work for me as a disabled person a lot of the time. And I read differently. I'm more of I had to teach myself to be more of an intuitive reader. I mean, this print's okay. But a lot of decks, they don't, the print or the fonts, and, you know, the person doing the walkthrough, that's the other thing. They can't get the camera close enough to where I can see what the print is. And that type of thing, you know, and we're always kind of forgotten about. Oh, you're partially blind, you don't read tarot. You're blind. Partially blind people read tarot. We just have to do it different. Sometimes I'll pull out the guidebook because the guidebook, the picture is enlarged. And there will be things that I see in the guidebook because it's a bigger picture than I don't see in the card, if depending on the guidebook. But I think as far as the walkthroughs go, it's going to deter that, you know, it's going to, especially now with the things that we're dealing with economy wise, you know, we should have a better say so in what we do or where we choose to purchase from. Let me fix this because now it's going to be all out of order, which is fine. But the gatekeeping and such within the community, you know, it's really getting ridiculous. And of course, you know, not saying that people shouldn't have an opinion, but maybe sometimes we need to work on whether or not we should have voiced that opinion. On people, you know, on to others. I mean, I'm just saying. Anyway, it's just something to think about when decks are being purchased. There are decks that I won't buy out of respect for other marginalized communities, exactly. Um, but it also depends on the person. But maybe that's might be a particular deck that I might use privately and not post over here on YouTube. But I think we need to be more focused on to each their own. And, you know, it's going to influence your decision as to whether or not you want to buy a particular deck. And we need to, I'm kind of at the point where I think maybe a lot of the people that are gatekeeping are people that have that need for control. But in any way, so I'm going to pull out some decks so that you guys can see some of the pairings I would do with this one. Now, since from what I perceived from the live, this is more of a empowerment and healing type of deck. I would be using the Yolanda Witch Tarot, which was something I got for Mother's Day last year, or 2025, whatever. I did do a review on this. And then, of course, the Sacred Path cards. I got these a long time ago, and there was a bit of a mishap with the deck. So I had two of the same card. And at the time, Hay House was not very nice. So, I'm sorry, I'm not going to edit out the kids being loud in the background. So, because that's just me. This is just real life. Which is something that, people are probably going to complain about in the, they're yelling at the dog. Because I can't get cards out two-handed. But, so this is a Sacred Path deck. And it's not necessarily a walkthrough, but I had two of the same deck. But anyway, as I was saying, back to my VR. We do have a lot of people that seem to feel that they can dictate, well, okay for me, but not for thee, and dictating what type of cards that people get. Now, although when I got this deck, I was rather new to Tarot and Oracle, so. But since this seems to be, the healing energy type of deck, the book is pretty thick and it's got a lot of really good tarot spreads in it. But I think that there's a lot of issues with control and people needing to control what other people do. Cultural appropriation. If a deck is purchased for you, I don't see how that necessarily applies. But doing walkthroughs and having an understanding of what exactly it is that you're purchasing. Everyone has a right to their opinion, but just because you have an opinion doesn't mean that you get to basically bully or force your opinions onto others. And since there's a lot of horses in the Crystal Keys Tarot, I think this is really great. This is a really great type of deck to have with this. But that's one of the decks that I have. And when we try to force our opinions, onto others, like I said, with that issue that I had with that particular live. But, we, as far as people being lazy when they do these walkthroughs, if you're excited about a deck or know someone who may like the deck, I did one deck review just because Erie had the other deck and she was interested in it, so I did, a quick walkthrough, and that was specifically for Erie. People have budgets. People get upset when you buy decks used. Well, people have income restrictions. So, and all that type of thing. So, maybe that's, plus it's recycling. So, you got to do what's good for you and what works for you, and not everybody else in the community. Sometimes, if you're going to be in a community, you have to. But so the other deck I thought that might work really well with this is and this was given to me by Willow Night Owl, the Cozy Witch Tarot, because this seems to me also to be like a healing and empowering type of deck. But when we have our own ideas of what works with pairings. I do pairings differently than, say, another creator. So, but that's one deck I would use with this. So, um, everyone is different. We're still individuals, and our practices are somewhat still very individualistic. We don't, no one, that's just how the witchy community is. So, but another deck that I'm going to use with this is the Believe in Your Magic. And I'm not going to pull out cards for a lot of these because I know this video is getting kind of long. Ask your guides. And which I got used. And another deck which was given to me, Miss Kulala's musical musings gave me this deck, the Psychic Tarot, which is in fact an oracle deck. Another deck that I would use with that particular deck, this is one of my favorites, would be Luna Soul. And then of course I have, and the art with this is a lot similar, and I never really did a review on this deck. For a lot of reasons, is why, if people aren't going to watch that type of content, then why do it? But I will go and I will view other people's, and another thing, not just with the deck reviews, but with the tarot hashtags that we do. And you'll see, people showing a couple of their decks. I've purchased decks because, well, that's the back. Some people have actually said, hey, I think you would really like this deck. Or people such as Phoenix or Phoenix Fire or Erie or Arwen Lynch or whomever have given me readings with particular decks, and I was like, oh, I kind of like that. Or, like Aiden Darling recommended Darkwoods Tarot and the Creatures Tarot. Lady at the Witchy Shop recommended the Tarot of Elves to me. This is why I say the art in this is kind of similar. Even though this is more like a Kabbalah, this is definitely, I had a little Kabbalah chart with this, so this is more like a Kabbalah-based deck. But like I said, I'm more of an intuitive reader. So, but, again, this is, sometimes I'll get a deck and not do the walkthrough, and I'll just be like, oh, I'll just make it work. And, like, but there's decks I would not have purchased had I taken the time to do the walkthrough on it, like the Sensual Wicca deck, for example. Had I been at the shop when I wanted to get a deck and it wasn't in my budget, and had I done a walkthrough, I probably wouldn't have gotten that deck. Bondage isn't my thing. So, but what works with someone else isn't, and the whole AI thing, like that's a whole other issue within itself. There's room within this community for everybody. There's room for the artists that take their time and really work at their art in order to create decks for people to use for their spiritual practices. And then, the AI, because, again, not everyone can draw, myself included. And, that's kind of a thing with exclusion where you're saying that, oh, you can't draw, so you can't create a deck. Maybe you have these visions in your head for what the deck might want to look like, and you can't necessarily get an artist to help you bring that to life. And of course, an artist is needs to have the freedom to do the type of art that they want to do. So, there's room for everybody. And we should have a better, as far as being informed consumers. I don't understand. And there may be a deck, like with Crystal Keys, that's rather new, and you're promoting the deck for your, for people to look at, and then they can decide whether or not that deck is going to work for them or not. I went on too long with that one. So, but anyway, and another deck that I would use for this is the Love Oracle that was gifted to me, of course, by Amethyst Ascension. And, because like I said, this deck, it seems to me, has more of a healing vibe to it. Of course, I've got the cards upside down because it's kind of hard to do things with one hand. But anyway, I think maybe we all need to kind of work on to each their own, and people being more accepting and understanding that some people within this community do have limitations, and they have to do what works for them and what's easiest for them. So anyway, that was kind of long-winded, and thanks guys for kind of listening to me ramble and watching. And I love the deck, and I am very grateful to Selena and to Dina for the deck. So anyway, peace, love, and light, guys.